This is Galileo 2333, leader of the Human Interaction Protection Front. There's been that they caught the guy that's dressed as Chucky the Clown, who's been harassing people in Philadelphia, and I have a theory that he works for some kind of a AI surveillance company like Flock or Axon. Increasingly, Motorola is a big enemy company now. They've gotten really big. They've gotten really big into the behavior detection, video behavior detection business. And I'm going to do another presentation about kind of Motorola, because it's really kind of unfortunate what's happened with Motorola. That they used to be a really nice company, like the technology, like they had some old TV commercials from a long time ago, but now they've become a really big player in the surveillance and behavior detection. So their company needs to be destroyed. So anyway, I'm doing a thing about that. But this thing about the Chucky the Clown guy, and this another one of those people like that. There was that Pink Panther guy in Virginia that was chasing kids at school bus stops, and that they're using that probably to train AIs to detect suspicious behavior around kids in school bus stops, because they're installing the cameras on the school buses. So this one's probably he's probably works for some kind of a surveillance company, and he's actually training the AI to recognize what suspicious behavior looks like in public. And I guess that the reason they apply a lot of makeup to these characters, to these perpetrator training characters, is so that the AI will not start to develop biases towards racial groups, because they have something that looks like a humanoid figure. So usually most of the behavior detection is by body posturing and positioning and that kind of stuff. So, but they want to make sure that the AI doesn't start to develop biases towards certain racial or ethnic groups. So they use a character that obviously doesn't look like any real person, like the Pink Panther. And there's also this mime guy. I think a guy that was dressed up like a mime. I think I was in Massachusetts. That was kind of acting creepy in public. That's probably another one. Another AI training system, or AI training kind of situation. So yeah, they use all sorts of different sources to train the AI to recognize behaviors. I think they use a lot of the Epstein files, like the Epstein files and the behavior on those properties, and all sorts of real world surveillance from real places. And the Epstein is like a control environment. It's like an experimental laboratory, because Epstein is really a huge enemy. He's a big anti-sexual promoter. He basically built the entire anti-sexual regime, and in order to do that, they basically ran a huge laboratory experiment system to research on thousands and thousands of children and adult-with-child interactions in all sorts of different situations, to model that and determine and to study how adults sexually interact with children, so that they could develop ways for the government to prohibit that activity. And it was a really big long-term experiment by the Epsteins, and the Epstein, they're connected with global intelligence. So yeah, the Epsteins are really enemy. They're really anti-sexual, and they have the added benefit of allowing the politicians to have sex with children and providing a blackmail mechanism, so that they can make it so that the rest of society really hates adult child sex, so they can keep all the politicians blackmailed. If they were to legalize child sex for everybody, if they were to legalize pedophile activity, legalize it for every adult to touch a kid, they'd no longer be able to blackmail the politicians. So that's why the government can't have that, and that's good. The government needs to be destroyed. And there's recently a bunch of U.S. Marshals fell off of a porch. There's been a video going around. A deck collapsed in front of some U.S. Marshals. That fell off of a deck where they were trying to raid some guy that actually, I found that he actually has a sex offender that they were trying to raid. So yeah, serves him right. And really, somebody should have taken that as a tactical opportunity to ambush those agents and killed a whole bunch of them. They probably could have. In that few seconds there, somebody could have opened fire and killed a bunch of those officers, and that would have been even better. And because they were busting them for something that shouldn't be a crime. I think they actually were raiding a sex offender. I think some of them were. I don't know. Some of them were injured. I think some of them were. I guess I don't know if they're real seriously injured, but it was that's actually a good thing. I mean, it's people should actually they should booby trap. Booby trapping is targeting law enforcement should really be justified. I mean, obviously that's a serious crime. It's going to be very illegal, but it's justified, and there should be jury nullification. A fallen officer is always a good day. I mean, actually, not literally fallen, but also, I mean, when an officer dies, when an officer is killed, that's always a good day. And it's actually especially good when a female officer is killed. And I'm predicting and anticipating that in the upcoming upcoming, because of these increases of attacks in public, there actually have been quite a big increase in stories around the United States about women jogging being attacked in public. and I think I'm expecting that I'm anticipating they're going to start introducing. I think cities in the United States are going to start introducing those women jogger police officers, similar to what they have in Britain. They're going to start introducing women jogger officers to protect women in public in the United States, and similar to what they have in Surrey, Britain, and other parts of Britain. And I think there's going to be upcoming. There's going to be states in the United States who are going to start actually enacting real laws. They're going to start enacting laws that specifically criminalize street harassment. I think is going to become the next legislative trend in the United States and U.S. states. And remember, jury nullification. I think they're going to treat it as a serious felony. They're probably going to charge it as a fairly substantial felony, comparable to a hate crime. They're going to say it's a gender violence-based hate crime, and that's the big justification they're going to use, because usually, like free speech, like First Amendment, like wolf whistling, catcalling, making sexist remarks, misogynistic comments, staring or leering at somebody, that's usually a First Amendment. That's in the United States, it's usually would be considered First Amendment protected speech and expression, as long as you don't touch somebody. And really, the threshold for touching should be a lot higher before that becomes criminal. For assault and battery, that kind of stuff. A lot of the ways they prosecute assault and battery is much too low of a threshold. They shouldn't charge somebody with a crime unless you actually really beat somebody up. And that shouldn't, that's the only time it should really be considered assault and battery criminally. But anyway, back to the idea that the First Amendment, think about that they're using an implied threat doctrine. A lot of places it's illegal to burn a cross or to show a swastika in public because it's like an implied threat, even though it's not really, it's like a freedom of expression or speech. And some people could consider that to be an implied threat of imminent physical harm based on what group of people they belong to. Like cross burnings often preceded an actual lynching of black people, and so that there would be like a black person might feel like they're imminent threat of physical harm if a cross is burned. And also the arson and reckless burning, that kind of stuff. But the thing is, it's like they're going to do a similar thing that wolf whistling and catcalling often precedes, often foreshadows or makes someone feel like they're like a woman is imminently about to get physically assaulted. And so they're going to use that implied threat doctrine to criminalize street harassment. Guys should be able to have interaction with girls and women. It's another, harassing women in public. It's another sign that guys are not being adequately given opportunities to meet girls and women for intimate relationship purposes. So that's another cause for those guys should actually be taken and introduced to a girl to have a relationship with, so that they don't have to resort to public strange, interacting with women in public strange. They're probably not going to get the relationship anyway. But the guy should actually be given an opportunity to interact with a girl or woman, just like with pornography. I don't really like pornography, but the thing about it is I'm against it for reasons that are against why the establishment's against it. It's a three-sided war. I'm always going to emphasize that we're in a three-sided war. I'm against a lot of these things for reasons that are against why the enemy is against them. So enemy of our enemy is also our enemy. The enemy of the enemy is not always our friend. In most cases, the enemy of the enemy is another enemy of ours. So we're in a multi-sided war, and both sides, both the Republicans and the Democrats, should be destroyed. Our mission is we're against both Republicans and Democrats. And I'm against Donald Trump, and I'm also against the progressives. The progressives want to make it so that we can't have relationships. They want to bring in all the immigrants and make it so that we can't have so the white guys can't have are not able to have interaction with immigrant and refugee brown third world women. And they're going to, because they say the power difference makes it inherently non-consensual. So, and the Republicans want to just keep all the third world immigrants out. So they have different mechanisms by which they want to block our access to the girls, but they have the same mission to make it so that the guys here in the first world, white guys, are not able to have relationships with third world refugee immigrant girls, and so both sides of the political establishment need to be destroyed, and every other side of the political establishment, because all the other independent parties, they're also the same thing. And there are no political parties that actually clearly support guys' ability to have interaction with girls and women. And it's really good that people are destroying the flock cameras. People are destroying all the surveillance cameras in public. That's actually a really good sign. But I'm also anticipating if they're gonna start handing down some heavy sentences on those people. Some people have been arrested for that, and it is charged as a felony in a lot of places. And I'm actually anticipating they're going to start handing down some serious sentences for this stuff. And keep in mind, I mean, this is for jury nullification. That people should be it caused to prisons, escape, invade and release people, liberate prisons. Another group of people that ought to be released and that should be pardoned and the jury nullification all the time and all this stuff is justified. It's a good act. But I think they're going to start. I think they're going to start handing down some felony sentences, some 20, 10, 15-year sentences for damaging these cameras. They might start charging people with obstruction of justice, or they might start, they might even start charging people as an accessory or an accomplice to a crime. That was, if it interfered with an investigation, if it facilitated somebody committing a sexual activity with a child. And the police were not able to investigate it because somebody had damaged a flock camera. They weren't able to prevent it from being able to gather the evidence. They might charge whoever vandalized that flock camera with. They might charge them with it being an accessory to that child abduction, being an accessory or even an accomplice to any crime that has happened that flock camera could have helped solve but didn't because that person vandalized it. So yeah, they're probably going to start really seriously cracking down because the police they don't like you cutting down their surveillance equipment. They don't like you to breaking their toys. Especially their high tech toys. The cops really don't like that. The government doesn't like being retaliated against. Just like Timothy McVeigh blew up the Oklahoma City building, the federal courthouse. He did that in retaliation for Waco. And one of the reasons that they were busting Waco, the Branch Davidians, is because David Koresh was engaging in child marriage activities. It was also over weapons and stockpiling weapons. But one of the things that they were investigating, and I think Janet Reno was really kind of ordered the investigation, was really a big part of the investigation, investigating the Branch Davidians. And they were investigating over child marriage and child sexual abuse. And that's what caused the feds to investigate and to massacre the Waco, the Branch Davidians. And in retaliation for that, Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols blew up the Oklahoma City federal courthouse in retaliation, and that was actually a good act. The government should be destroyed, and the retaliation against the government is fully justified. But of course, the government does not like being retaliated against. They don't, police don't like being directly and personally retaliated against, and they're going to retaliate against us again. So we're going to have to keep attacking them, and we're going to have to destroy them. Our mission is to make it so that the old guys can have a relationship with young girls and not be subject to interference, it's going to come to a war. I mean, they're over. The government is infringing on our ability to have relationships and freedom of association, and increasingly, like Third Amendment, quartering. I mean, actually, having surveillance, in houses. I mean, that's equivalent to a Third Amendment violation. Like the government, requiring, that you allow military to be stationed inside of your house. And that's a Third Amendment violation. So yeah, there's the government needs to be removed. And yeah, well, anyway, this is Intimate Relationship Protection Front. Y'all are 23rd, signing off.